Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. Thank you to all of you out there for joining us today. And thanks to our panelists for being here to talk about onboarding new restaurant employees. I am Keely Hungate, VP of Marketing at Kickfin. I'll be moderating the panel discussion. This is an incredibly important and timely topic, especially in today's labor market and overall regulatory climate. So we've got a lot to talk about. First, I want to run through a little bit of housekeeping here. We've blocked off about 45 minutes for the actual panel discussion, and then we've left a little time at the end for a Q&A. All of the attendees here are muted, but you should be able to send questions in throughout the session. So use that Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom menu. Other attendees won't be able to see those, so don't be shy. Just send them as you're thinking about them, and then we'll answer as many as we can when we get to the Q&A portion. And of course, we hope you'll stay for the whole thing, but if you have to hop off early, we'll be sending the recording out to everyone, hopefully by the end of the day, maybe tomorrow morning. One other thing I wanted to note is that you'll hear some discussion today around policies and regulations that are specifically geared toward California employers. That's where all of our panelists are based. But most of what we're talking about are really things that any restaurant employer should be thinking about, no matter where they're located. And then one last thing, please keep in mind, we've got very experienced folks here on the panel, including a real live labor and employment attorney. But what we're sharing today is not intended to be legal guidance. So we'll provide contact information for all of the panelists if you want to reach out to them individually after the session, just an obligatory disclaimer there. All right, and now I want to introduce the panelists, or let the panelists introduce themselves. Justin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Kickfin?
Yeah, my name is Justin Roberts, co-founder of Kickfin. On behalf of Kickfin, we just wanted to thank the audience members for joining today. We feel lucky to spend this time with you. Many would be surprised that over 85% of hospitality operators are still caught in the analog process of tipping out employees at the end of every shift. And Kickfin exists to turn what is an operational burden of paying out cash tips into a benefit for employees. Quite simply put, our software literally digitizes the checkout process. We move money directly to the employee's bank of choice in under 2 seconds. We've had the privilege of serving operators across the country in every single state, and have been recognized as the top tip disbursement company in the entire country. So feel lucky to be here, and we want to make sure that this is time well spent for the people who've joined.
Thanks, Justin.
Jenny?
Hi, everybody. Jenny Ryyppa-Rodriguez here. I'm a manager at Heartland Payroll Solutions. I've been here for a little while at Heartland. Heartland is one of the leading payroll and HR companies in the nation. As you can read from the screen, we are about a $4 billion company. We have about 50,000 clients in USA across the nation. We've been doing payroll since 1997. I myself have been in the industry for 17 years. I've been almost 7 years at Heartland here. I'm HR certified in California. I brought over about 1,300, close to 1,400 clients to my service over the years. I'm one of the top producers, top advisors, I guess, in my company, top 5 percentile, and was very lucky to actually get an Entrepreneur of the Year award this March in our conference. So very happy to have that. But my whole how I look at my clients is just to make sure that everybody's complying with California rules and regulations and their payroll are done correctly. And exactly probably what Beth wants everybody to do. So here's Beth, our resident labor lawyer.
Hi, my name is Beth Schroeder. I'm a partner with Feldman. My specialty is labor and employment law. And I also specialize in the hospitality industry. I currently sit on the Los Angeles chapter of the California Restaurant Association. And my specialty is to work with employers to keep them out of litigation, although I do work in litigation from time to time, representing employers. Really, I try to do prophylactic work in keeping people out, and do a lot of work with, just as Jenny does, on the compliance side, as you'll hear today, doing handbooks, employment agreements. And we will definitely talk today about the impact of the most recent Supreme Court case, the Viking River Cruises case, and what that means for class action waivers and employment agreements.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so our agenda today, we've got three main topics we're going to be touching on. First, we want to give a little context as to why it's necessary to have a structured, standardized onboarding program. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the common mistakes or pitfalls that we see owners and operators making all the time. And finally, we'll discuss 5 key considerations for hospitality employers when you're either building or revamping your onboarding program. So first things first, want to touch on the why behind onboarding optimization. Why is it important to have a structured program in place? Beth, I would love to hear your thoughts from a legal perspective here.
Well, people sometimes forget that labor laws apply to you from day one. Actually, all the anti-discrimination laws apply to you in hiring because they apply to applicants as well as employees. People often say that to me. They say, well, you know, I'm just hiring. But all those laws we talk about that apply to you in firing apply to you in hiring as well. So you have to pay attention to everything you do from the hiring stage, and setting the tone of your business matters, and consistency matters, and what your managers do matters from the beginning. And nowadays, as Jenny's going to talk about, hiring and retention and attracting employees matters in a year like 2022 more than anything. And what you do state by state or municipality by municipality, we're looking at July 1, all the minimum wages changing. Even within Los Angeles County, minimum wages are going to be different. So keeping abreast of all the changes is particularly important. And we use that C word, the compliance word, to make sure that you're looking at your documentation, your handbooks and things like that, because a mistake can mean a lawsuit that could be something like a 6, 7, or 8 figure class action or policy.
Justin, what about the retention angle? I know we're all talking a lot about hiring and recruiting, and we know that's a big problem, but turnover is an even bigger operational challenge, impacts profitability. Can you talk a little bit about how onboarding is related to turnover?
Absolutely. It's been really inspiring for us to see hospitality operators, traditionally looking at who are my customers? How do I design the menu? What is the ambiance around in the restaurant? But now so many of them are also looking at their employees as customers. So when you think about that, what that experience means, everything from how do you post a job opening online? What does the interview process look like? And then all the way through, I'd like to give just a quick example. We work with some of the most progressive operators in the country, but there's a brand called Walk-Ons. They're probably the fastest growing sports bar, and if you look online, just on LinkedIn, the culture that they create from literally day one just really goes to show that restaurant operators are really looking at this like from a full cycle, all the way from like how everything is put into place, how you welcome people, and then looking at that retention is ongoing in the daily stand-up. So I think they'll come to the meetings with a punch list of, hey, here are the things that are important to us to this day. Here's where we can improve. And retention is now looked at as a critical component, if not the most important, because if you look at turnover in the industry and the cost of turnover, obviously people are now looking at this as this is 365, 24/7, the way in which we look at our staff and supporting them to be successful.
I think that dovetails nicely with the next point about performance, how a good onboarding program can sort of set the stage for success for your employees. Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about that?
And I think both of you, Beth and Justin, mentioned this, setting a tone. That's what I talk when I have a new restaurant owner, which I meet with a lot of new restaurant owners online and so forth, going over what my company has to offer. I always talk to them that usually what they hire in the restaurant hospitality space is usually the generation that knows technology. So they are really excited when you actually send their onboarding documents, and we'll talk more about those electronically. That also tells the employee that, ooh, they have all these paperwork ready to go. They are up with the times. I want to bring my A game because they are putting all these employee handbooks in front of me and so forth. There's no questions being left to answer about how they get paid, what do they get to have, because it's all explained on the onboarding documents already. Also, talking about the culture, maybe your employee handbook should have that section where you talk about what you are all about and how you treat your employees. And then obviously expectations of the role and company policies. So all that is so important in the beginning. It's a very different experience walking into your new job and having a scribbled W-4, and that's all you have, compared to a whole slew of paperwork, including direct deposit opportunity and the employee handbook with all the cultural information and so forth. So I have noticed this, that when we have implemented from the scribbled W-4 into a full onboarding experience electronically, even the morale of the new employees have been totally different from the employees before. And it leads into retention and compliance.
Yeah, and also has a direct impact on profitability again when your employees are
Absolutely.
performing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Turnover is very costly, as we heard.
So all of our panelists have worked with a lot of hospitality employers. They have a lot of war stories. So we wanted to hear just a few today, the most common mistakes that we're seeing out there when employers are bringing on new hires. Beth, talk to us about the class action waiver and arbitration agreements.
Yeah, well, when we were all talking about, this run through, that wasn't even my war story, but obviously this has become the big story of the day and of the year. So last week, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision in the Viking River cruise case, and we, of course, were on the edges of our seat waiting for this decision, and it came down. As I said when I wrote about it, they gave us a home run. They knocked it out of the ballpark for us. So what the Viking River Cruises decision said was essentially it overturned the California Supreme Court case of Scanian, which had said that class action waivers would not apply to PAGA suits. And PAGA suits are California's pesky, and pesky is the nicest word I could use, statute that allow attorneys and employees to bring representative actions in California, but not go through all the protocols of a class action. And because they involve the state of California as a party, California had said that they would not be subject to class action waivers. Now, class action waivers are something that we lawyers like us put in arbitration agreements, and they are sort of the golden ticket. I and my team have been huge, strong believers in arbitration agreements with class action waivers, and we put them pretty much anywhere we can possibly put them. Handbooks, offer letters, employment agreements, anything an employee will sign. And yes, I put them in handbooks. A lot of attorneys don't believe in this, but I do. I think you put them in handbooks because employees will sign handbooks. You don't hide them in handbooks. The judges don't like that. We actually put on the front page of the handbook. We boldly put it in the topic section, and we put it on the back page of the handbook that you are signing an employee handbook with an arbitration clause in it. And we bold it so everybody knows it. And that way the judges will approve it. And we get these handbooks with arbitration agreements approved all the time. What that does is it knocks out your class action cases. Class action cases can be 7 or 8 figure cases. So can PAGA cases. Now, up until last week, those arbitration agreements didn't do anything for us with PAGA cases, but as of last Wednesday, they now do. And if you have that magic class action language in your handbook with an arbitration clause, guess what? We are now making phone calls and writing letters and making motions to tell these attorneys who have written our clients with PAGA letters and PAGA lawsuits, bye-bye. And believe me, this is a very, very fulfilling letter in motion I am writing. So you want to have that get out of jail free card in your handbook, and you want to have it every day and often. So if you don't have that now, run, do not walk to put it into your handbooks, offer letters and agreements now, because you do not, attorneys are filing these PAGA letters. We get a notice of what the PAGA letters that are sent to the state of California every week. And they're hundreds. I am not making this up. Hundreds of PAGA letters. So this is literally now your get out of jail free card. I cannot stress this more importantly, that this is the most important thing you can do to protect your business.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, Jenny, tax credits. Talk about this missed opportunity that we see. In
Yes, so we all went through COVID, and obviously we are still kind of in it, but not the way that we were a couple of years ago. And there was a lot of different programs, and I'll touch upon employee retention credit, and there was PPP loans and all those things. But with that, people forgot about this little tiny credit called Work Opportunity Tax Credit. Since 1996, the federal government has been given federal tax credits to certain companies that hire certain people. So if you hire people that have been on food stamps, have been incarcerated in the last year or so, have been now out, obviously, people that are veterans, empowerment zone employees, and also the big thing with the COVID was long-term unemployed. If you hire a person who has been 27 weeks or longer unemployed on EDD and they come and work for you, you actually can get a credit. And the credit starts about $2,400 up to $9,600 against your federal tax, federal business credit, business tax. So you do it once a year with your federal tax return for your business. So these are dollar to dollar. And people forgot about that. So it's important that when you do the onboarding, as we're talking about onboarding, you screen your employees for the work opportunity tax credit. So what happens is the employee themselves will answer the questions if they are in any of these categories. And after that, the employer gets a notification that would you like to screen the candidate for this credit, and so forth. So we have here at Heartland, we actually have a program that screens every new employee for this work opportunity tax credit. My largest client is a 22 location restaurant, and there was a possibility last year for them to get $180,000 worth of work opportunity tax credit. Oh. Think about that. Did that pay for their payroll and HR service? Oh, yes, many times over. So I always tell my restaurant clients that here in my company, my restaurant clients do not pay for payroll because these work opportunity tax credits will offset your pricing for the payroll. So if you do not know about work opportunity tax credit, talk to your CPA. My information is in the end. I'd love to talk to you more about it. Employee retention credit, obviously, because of COVID, every restaurant pretty much will be getting employee retention credit as you had to shut down, you had to social distance, there was governmental orders on that. So if you have not done your ERC, which is done with the quarterly paperwork with your payroll service company of whoever you're running payroll with, please also come back to me and send me an email and I can go over that program also. It is starting to be very well known at the moment, so I don't want to go too much into it. But again, if you have not done an ERC, employee retention credit, because of you obviously were hit by COVID, if you are a restaurant, I would love to talk to you more about it also. And that's thousands of dollars. We were looking at when we were doing these quarterlies for our clients in the hospitality industry, we were averaging $28,000 per quarter for our restaurant clients in credits. And this program you can still take advantage of if you have not done it. We can go back and redo your 941s, which is the federal tax return for the payroll. So we can actually go back and redo those for you and get those credits. So would love to help you with any of these and ask your CP about also the work opportunity tax credit.
And y'all, just a reminder, we are talking about some really technical things here. So continue to ask questions during the presentation, and remember, we'll provide a way to reach out directly to everyone here if you've got more in-depth questions. Justin, so I know at Kickfin we're always talking about the risk of resisting digitization. How does that relate to onboarding?
Well, A day in the life of a restaurant operator is complex because you not only have to manage staff, but you also have to manage a tech stack. And that's very sophisticated and complicated in its own right. If we look more specifically towards onboarding, the Heartland platform, for example, and others out there that look at kind of digitizing from hire to retire, kind of putting that all under one umbrella is fantastic. Because when you think about it from an employee experience, the way in which I go through being set up, the way in which I go through the scheduling process or changing my deductions and payroll, so on and so forth. We're seeing a lot of platforms that have become very siloed, moved to obviously a Swiss Army knife of doing everything from the start of employment all the way until, putting money in their 401k from a very digital standpoint. When we look at more specifically, what's the why behind digitizing the tip out process? Simply put, again, operators across the board, the lion's share of them are either doing bank runs, having armored car deliver cash, which is very time consuming, it's laborious, and it's probably the most analog piece of an operator's daily work. The value prop of digitizing that process is twofold. One, from the operator's perspective, they now have a digital record down to the penny of every single tip that has been paid out. So a manager that could even be offsite could log into a system like Kickfin, review who's been paid out, the reconciliation would happen, and now that accountant could actually look in and say, instead of looking at this moving target of cash, I now can specifically look and kind of ping back exactly where that tip money went, who it was assigned to, and now I have a digital record of that. Then on the employee side of things, it's going to eliminate the discrepancies, right? You're not going to have an employee show up and say, hey, I lost my envelope, or you shorted me. Now there's true transparency into this, obviously lion's share of, employees' earnings, and there's now a digital record. So a 20 doesn't go lost. There's no skimming, theft, things along those lines. So when we think of digital, we think of trying to make sure that as you're going through the RFP process, you're looking at vendors that can really cover the scope from hire to retire and provide technical solutions that can really take a very analog piece and digitize that in a very easy way. So I think you're seeing more people open to that process, and there's great partners out there that we're all obviously happy to help with the vetting process of looking at alternatives.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to run through, we've come up with, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are five things you can do to optimize the way that you are onboarding your employees right now. So here's a full list: refreshing your handbook or creating one if you don't already have it, reviewing key hiring documents, tuning into changing regulations, digitizing everything. We'll go a little bit more in depth there, and then considering legal review once you've done all of these things. So Jenny, start us off. Tell us what we need to know about the handbook.
That's right. This is I always tell my clients this. You have a 16-year-old, they get a driver's license. Do you just let them out there to the streets to drive? No, you're going to teach them all about, when to stop, what does that sign means, where do I have to turn, what are the rules of the road? And that's what the handbook is for your company. If you do not give a handbook to your employees, they do not know a lot of things that they need to know, like when they get paid, what is the sick leave policy for my company, which, as Beth will talk about that, how important that is. Has it been a law for over 5 years? In general, it talks about the culture also. We also want to talk about the sexual harassment, because that is, of course, everybody has to take now in California, managers for 2-hour course and employees 1-hour course, and so forth. Actually, let's show this next slide so I can kind of show you how the handbook could look like. So my company has HR services. With our HR services, we customize an employee handbook for you. There'll be some questions you have to answer before you start customizing it, and then you also get a dedicated person to talk to you about the handbook afterwards, HR certified and so forth. But if you look at this list of 47 pages, and as Beth can say, they can be also 150 pages, but this is a basic 47-page. This is called basic 47-page employee handbook. So if you look at all these things that are in here: conduct and behavior, compensation, benefits, health, safety, security, guidelines in general, employment separation. How do I separate from myself and how do I resign? And obviously in the end, you will sign this and so forth. If you look into these things, what they have in there, don't you want your employees to know how you want to conduct your business? You don't want to just throw them out to the wild and say, okay, go serve. So this is something you can put in your onboarding packet. With us, we can do this electronically. They can literally look at it from their cell phone directly. They can read it from their cell phone, pad, or computer, and then they're sign it. And again, we customize it to your liking. But when I do my new client meetings, I always show this because I always want them to see, look what's in here. And one thing we talked about earlier with this panelist is social media. It's on the page 42 in our handbook, which is a huge thing. Again, you are hiring younger generations, and my niece is here to take care of my children this summer, and she's glued to her TikTok, she's glued to her Instagram, all these things. And they talk about their jobs. They talk about who they work for. So you absolutely want to have a policy that you do not talk badly about the company you work for in the social media platforms. It's very important. But you want to explain that. Maybe the new generation doesn't really understand that that's something that employees should probably put on social media. So again, this is just an example of one. Again, these can go up to 150 pages. What I always recommend is once we do this, have someone like Beth look over it also and add some things into it that is missing, or put some language in it, as Beth likes to put the arbitration agreement and class action paperwork inside of the handbook. So then Beth can even make it bigger. But this is a great start, at least to have some kind of guidelines for employees so they know what they're walking into.
Jenny, one question for you about the different versions, English and Spanish versions. Is that a suggestion or is that a requirement depending on where you are?
Again, if you have Spanish speakers, if you give them an English handbook with 47 pages of text, will they understand that? Perhaps not. The whole idea of the handbook is to make them understand what they're walking into. So absolutely highly recommend having it in English and Spanish. Our system can actually, it cannot do it in Spanish really, but we have resources to get it done in Spanish, absolutely. But our system will send the basic documents like W-4 and I-9 and those kind of governmental things, which we'll talk about next, in Spanish also. So we have an opportunity to do that. The employee handbook needs to be obviously in Spanish also. Highly recommend that. Why give them 47 pages if they don't understand it?
There are actually certain laws that require certain policies to be in Spanish. FMLA requires, if you have a certain percentage of your workforce that speaks a certain language, that it has to be in that language. So you may want to have your FMLA policy in Spanish. Sexual harassment, I think, is required to be in Spanish, and we put the arbitration agreement as a matter
of course, our favorite topic today, for sure.
Arbitration. Otherwise, I mean, we literally yesterday had an attorney who argued that her employee couldn't be held to it because the agreement wasn't in Spanish, and we respectfully pointed out that we actually, his agreement was in Spanish because we put all of our arbitration agreements in Spanish.
And Beth, real quick there, somebody that asked, does a social media policy infringe on freedom of speech?
It doesn't. First of all, most employers are not, unless they are government employers, they're part of the government, are not bound by the First Amendment, funny enough. People forget that. The First Amendment is a Constitution, governs acts by the government. So as I actually had a client who asked me once, he said, can we actually put that in our handbook that we are not bound by the First Amendment, which is kind of funny. However, importantly, very importantly, your social media policy is governed by the National Labor Relations Act. So you want to make sure that you are putting language in your social media policy that says that your employees do have a right to engage in protected concerted activity, because the National Labor Relations Act has been very active of late in making sure that they take action with certain companies' social media policies. So we always make sure that we put that language into our social media policies and other policies in the handbook that remind employees that they have the right to engage in concerted protected activity, because they do have the right to engage in communication with coworkers on social media about the terms and conditions of the company. And there have been a lot of litigation on that topic, interestingly enough.
I don't doubt that at all.
So Beth, we've got beyond the handbook, and I know some of these documents listed here can actually also live in the handbook, but we wanted to call these out specifically because these are things that we generally like to see. Can you just give us a rundown? And I know, Jenny, you've got some thoughts on these too.
Yeah, so in addition to the handbook, obviously there are other documents that we have, we call new hire documents. You often want to have an offer letter. And I usually say if you're going to have an offer letter or an application, and you ask employees, can you perform the job, with or without accommodation, how would they know how to answer that question if you don't provide a job description? And so you should do that with an application. And by the way, have your employees sign an application. I had one client over the pandemic who said to me that her applicants were refusing to sign job applications, which I thought was the oddest thing. They just were refusing. They said, we're going to respond to these Indeed notices or whatever they were, but they were refusing to sign job applications. And I just, people have been so strange lately. They need to warrant the accuracy of what they're saying they did or didn't do. But offer letters, I mean, Jenny and I were both talking about offer letters. I think that with a job description, all your appropriate tax forms, the I-9s, obviously, once they're hired, which is the immigration form. And then the labor code section 2810.5, which is your wage theft prevention notice. And a lot of people say, what's that? It's been in effect since 2014. And it is our favorite little labor code form that gets handed out to all your non-exempt employees, which should be the bulk of your employees, which basically says what their wage payment is, their hourly wage is. It talks about sick pay, it talks about who their work comp carrier is, and also about little fun details about their job. And then, of course, you may want to have it on the offer letter, but you may want to have it as a separate agreement, but there's our little friend, the arbitration agreement with the class action waiver again.
Great. Okay, so this is also a hard topic because everything seems to be in flux all the time at federal, state, and local level. So these are a few areas that we've talked about as we've been preparing for this panel. So Justin, can you talk a little bit about tip pooling?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an exciting opportunity to put a pep in a policy, right? When you think of employees' potential of earning tips, it's a fantastic way to increase, obviously, earnings above and beyond the W-2. So when you think of creating a tip policy, fundamentally, you're going to want to be, is it, a straight pool? Is it percentage of sale? You're going to want to come up with some kind of, configuration that best supports the hospitality group as a whole. When we think about creating these policies, it's all about transparency. Because a lot of what we find is that, where lawsuits happen on kind of the more minutia things as it relates to our managers completely need to be ex-nate from the tip pool. Do you follow federal, state, and what specifics? Is it a tip credit state, what have you? And then just making sure that people understand how this is being divided up and there's true visibility into what they're receiving after each and every shift. I would say the people who look at a tip policy and are most successful at rolling that out really make that part of the employee's daily work. What's the why behind the way in which we're creating this? Do we want people that are supporting the servers to also participate, whether point of sale whether points based, percentage of the pool, what have you. And what we wanted to do is, Keely, if you can include the link, we've put together a very detailed kind of tipping policy best practice. Obviously, when you get through that, you're going to want sign off, from your attorney, just to make sure that within that specific local, state, and jurisdiction, that everything is in compliance. But most importantly, that policy that we've put together just really creates a framework. And Beth, maybe there's some things that you want to share, being that you co-authored that with us, that would be helpful as well.
I couldn't underscore the transparency part of that more. Justin and Keely and I've had a conversation about this. it's what is a trigger for every lawsuit I've ever seen about tip pooling is confusion with employees and sometimes consumers, because we've had lawsuits with consumers and sometimes even the DA, in San Diego, they were very aggressive. And I just had a client who got a letter from the local DA. It wasn't a lawsuit, but it was just, a question about their verbiage, which wasn't, by the way, even their verbiage. But, the DA's gotten involved in these, sometimes service charge, tip issues, whatever. And it's all about confusion with the verbiage and the transparency and people using the wrong language and not rolling it out carefully. And so much of it is just about PR. And so whether it's changing a tip pooling policy or rolling out a new one or just getting behind the one you have, it really is about transparency and communication and getting your team on board. I really like to get the managers on board with the new program first, get them involved, get them behind it, because they're the ones who can sabotage something if it goes wrong.
Mhm.
So get them on board with it. And that's true, by the way, with the handbook too. I'm actually going tomorrow to a handbook meeting with a bunch of managers, and then they're rolling out a new handbook with their team. Just get everybody on board first, answer questions, be transparent, and be available to people, be available to your team to answer questions, and don't be defensive. Be there to answer questions and make sure. We were doing a run through yesterday, and I had a client who texted me and said, I have an employee who thinks that the tip pooling is unlawful. What can I send her? And this is a client who's had tip pool for probably 15 years. But I've on many occasions sent my clients, articles and information so that they can get their employees information, because people think that tip pooling is something that it's not. So just be there to support your employees and answer their questions so that they can have the most information, and you can be there to back them up.
So Jenny, what about CalSavers? I know there's also an employee communication element there as well.
Absolutely. So this is the newest thing that is being thrown at the California employers. Well, it started 2 years ago for companies over 100 employees. Last year was 50 employees. And in 9 days, let's hear it. Now it's here. 5 employees or more. If you have 5 employees or more, you now have to offer a retirement solution for employees. And obviously CalSavers is the driving force behind it. So it's a California basically retirement option for employees to put money into retirement. This is going to hit the hospitality industry very hard, because this is pretty much every restaurant has 5 employees or more. So what happens here is it's an automatic enrollment. If the employee does not opt out with the opt-out form, or call the employee line, or fax, or go online to opt out of the CalSavers program, then you have to, as a restaurant owner operator, you have to put 5% deduction automatically into the payroll for that employee. So that on the 30th days of the employment. So this is now something that you don't want to not talk about. This is going to be part of your onboarding documents. You want to give them a page that explains the CalSavers, and these are all on calsavers.com website. You also want to give them the opt-out form ahead of time and say, here's an option. You can absolutely go in. Obviously, don't persuade them not to go in. We want people to retire with money, right? And then also explain the program. This has to be now part of the onboarding. And again, with our system, we will have all this ready to go for you. You can do it electronically again. But this is the biggest thing that is happening right now. I've been promoting this to my clients for the last 2 months. Your options is you also can start a 401k plan for your company, or simple IRA. And there's a couple other options for nonprofits also, and so forth. But 401k, simple IRA, or the CalSavers is the most important. Very importantly, my company does interface with CalSavers. We'll send the payment information to them. The CalSavers will pull the money out of the employer's bank account. We also let them know who the new hires are, so CalSavers can send them a package to their homes also. So there's payroll companies out there do not interface with CalSavers. So it's important that you partner yourself with someone, that this doesn't become a huge problem again, once you run the payroll, now you have to go to CalSaver's website. So there is payroll companies such as Heartland that can partner with you to take care of the CalSavers.
And Jenny, I know this is specific to California, but you had mentioned there are about 11 other
There's
states
11 other
as well.
states
Yeah.
in United States that have this program. So please, obviously, most of you probably other states, you probably know about your own programs, but I would absolutely Google this. This is something that is happening in 11 of the states, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. USA is a little worried about people not retiring with money, you know, so they are trying to get these programs going where there's automatic enrollment. So they're hoping the employees don't even notice the money come out of their check, which is very rare, but hey, let's get those people to save somehow, right? So that's the whole idea behind it. But again, my information is in the end. I'd love to tell you more about it and the options and so forth.
And then last things we've got here, minimum wage, meal and rest breaks. Beth, I know this is something else you hear a lot about in California.
Yeah, well, again, so July 1st is another, you know, in California, we have the minimum wage going up either at the beginning of the year, California goes up, or if you're in Los Angeles or Los Angeles County, you may have minimum wage going up. So depending where you are, check your minimum wage. And you know, so many times it depends on where you are. I had 2 clients yesterday send me a list of all their locations, and sometimes, you know, they don't even know where they are. You know, if they are in unincorporated Los Angeles, if they're sitting on the border of someplace, and you know, it can, and in Los Angeles County, we're going to have so many different minimum wages. And for the first time, I believe Los Angeles City and unincorporated Los Angeles County will have 2 different minimum wages. Los Angeles City will have 1604, unincorporated Los Angeles County will have 1596. And then the state of California, so if you're in a city like Burbank or Glendale or Beverly Hills, you'll still be at $15 if you're 26 or more employees. And then of course, the state of California is going to go to $15.50 for all size employers January 1st. And then West Hollywood, you know, they're going to be, you know, crazy in this. And by the way, I'm going back to it as soon as I'm done here. West Hollywood, as of July 1st, is going to have a paid and unpaid leave policy, not sick leave, but paid leave. So it's going to be like a PTO policy of 96 hours plus, I think, 84 hours of unpaid leave. And it's a very complicated policy because it has to do with, you know, how much you can carry over at the end of the year, how much you can get paid out at the end of the year, how much gets paid out upon termination. It's a very complicated policy. So if you have any locations in West Hollywood, or your employees working in West Hollywood, July 1st is your deadline. Meal and rest breaks, welcome to California. You know, it's still a very complicated policy. Just make sure you have it written correctly. Rest breaks, you get 10 minutes of rest breaks for every 4 hours or major fraction thereof. If your policy doesn't say major fraction thereof, it is written incorrectly, and you are subject to a class action just on the face of your written policy, period. Doesn't matter if people are getting their breaks. It is just a wrong policy, and you will lose a class action, period, end of story. So these are the kind of reasons that we have these class action waivers. Those are expensive lawsuits. It is still the most common lawsuit we see, even on an individual basis. An individual misclassified manager, by the way, can still be a 6-figure lawsuit just for the individual person. So again, these are incredibly expensive lawsuits. We haven't even talked about, when we talked about you know, some of the common mistakes, misclassifying employees. We talked about that yesterday. From exempt to non-exempt, still probably one of the most common mistakes we see. We didn't even put that down here. So yes, we could do this whole thing again and cover a whole other list of things, right?
Okay, let's drill down into the digitization. So we touched on this a little earlier about the mistakes, but what are the actual things we want to digitize? How do we do that? Justin, start us off here.
Yeah, well, in webinars, obviously we're touching the big buttons, right? And I think so much of that then happens after a call like this. And I think when we think about digitizing, you know, really from hire to retire, I think there's the best in class vendors or partners that we have on the phone today that really want to be able to say, okay, now that we've looked at this opportunity to take what feels very analog, feels very time consuming, and digitize that process, not only for the operation efficiencies, but also to give that employee the feeling that, hey, this company is really investing in my experience here. So, when we look at starting with setting the tone of the employee handbook, documenting the enrollment process of employment, digitizing the payout process from the W-2s to the tip earnings. And then obviously like looking at this, not just being a one and done, but how do we kind of create these policies to be the daily language in which we, talk about our work. And I think when people really buy into this is not a bucket of onboarding, a bucket of retention, but they look at it, how is this, my employees are my customer. How do I look at nurturing them throughout the process is a real big investment, but it definitely pays off. When you think about also, keeping records and organizing around, making sure that, when we were field testing Kickfin, we would literally go to operators and they would pull out a bag of cash and basically a vanilla envelope of, people signing off on receiving their tips, and our heads exploded. We're like, there's no way that you can keep account for that over many years of time. And so, I think what we're seeing today is that, there are some people who have been there, experts in the industry that want to be of service to this community. And what that means is that we can take a lot of these bigger talking points, move them out more specifically to like what's important to the audience on the phone, and really kind of advise and counsel on, how do we make sure that these things actually take shape on a daily basis. So we just want, the group here to know that there's a lot of big themes here, but as we talk about these, like we're always here to make sure that we can share that advice, regardless of the relationship, whether we met you just today, or in weeks down the road, we're here to make sure that we can put that into practice. So Keely.
Well, so just aside from giving employees visibility and access to those documents, I think a lot of times you onboard them, they're hired, they get all this stuff at the beginning and then they never know what happens to it. And so that by digitizing it, they get constant access. They know where to find it when they need it. But there's also that the record keeping aspect. Jenny, you had talked about, there are actual requirements to have some of these employment documents on record for a number of years.
There's a lot of things, there's different things here. There's some of them need to be 3 years, and some of them need to be 7 years. So I've kind of blanketed all my employers and I said, keep everything for 7 years. Also in our system, there's training materials, ongoing materials. When people go and look at their pay stubs and W-2s and personal information, which they will probably look at every week, the employer can actually put the handbook also there. The employer can also put sexual harassment pamphlet there. So it becomes like an info center for the whole company. So every time you go look at your pay stub, you can also look at all, even if you want to put training materials or weekly topic, or even, hey, holiday parties coming, whatever you want to say to the employees, and have the employee handbook always visible also in a place where employees visit all the time. Not just, hey, I saw it once when I signed up with this company 2 years ago. Let's keep it visible. Let's keep it in front of you digitally, so you always have access to it. And I think one bulletin point you have here, right people have access and permission. You don't want everybody to have access to onboarding. Maybe that's just the manager of the location who can onboard new employees, but maybe the manager doesn't have access to the whole payroll. We have a single sign-on for all of this, but we can also piece it out so the manager can have only access to onboarding, but the owner only has access to payroll. All these things also, let's just say you want to give a notice to employee, you're always late and so forth. You probably want to do that on paper. You can now attach it to that employee on the files. So even if you do paper, now you scan it in and keep it up and keep it in a folder for that person. We have unlimited storage for all these kind of documents. So again, you can't completely get out of paper, unfortunately. It is just the way it is, but you can put 90–95% on paper and then keep it. As in HR, we always talk about document, document, document. And I know as a restaurant owner, that's very hard because you have so much going on. You have so many things to worry about. That's why we want to digitize things and make it easier for you so you don't get in trouble.
So last thing here, we've talked about all of these points throughout the presentation, but Beth, I think you were the one who was saying we really need at least once a year, you should be looking at your handbook. Is that right?
Yeah, we actually have a program that, we automatically send out at any of you. And I know we have a lot of clients on this call, get emails from us about our annual handbook updates. So we send out an email every year at least, and obviously sometimes they're mid-year changes. But hey, here's this year's legal updates, we recommend the changes this year. And then we also tell you to take a look at your own handbooks for your own, processes and things that may be updating, because along with the legal updates, there are going to be things within your company that have changed. And we want you to take a look and to make sure that the handbook also reflects your own programs, policies, and procedures, because there may be things that aren't correct because you've changed them. So pull out the handbook, dust it off, look at it, make sure it's reflecting what you're doing, and then send it to us. And then, we'll do the legal updates every year.
And Justin, one last point I wanted to call out here too, that you touched on was explaining the what and the why behind the policy. So, a lot new employees are getting a ton of stuff thrown at them, and helping to explain why a lot of these policies are in place can really help with buy-in and showing them how they serve the employees too. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be overcomplicated. I think the best operators that we see literally put together sound bites, really quick and to the point. They have their daily stand-ups, they're going through the menu, what are the specials today? And they find creative ways to weave in the why behind everything. So maybe there's something that needs to be touched on in the employee handbook for the social media policy, or there's a change that it's going to be occurring. The best operators that we see are using that stand-up, that team and culture collaboration to, weave in what's important, the why behind we do the business the way in which we do it. And it doesn't have to be this 30-minute meeting. It could literally be like, we're going through the daily work. And by the way, we're going to have one theme that we're going to talk about as it relates to this. And once that kind of pattern recognition is seen by the employees, they really understand that this employer is really investing in this system and process and culture that is really going to support me as I work here. And I would just say less is more. Sometimes keep it consistent. Don't make it a yearly review of a handbook and then put it back on the shelf, or any of the other policies that are in place. Make it part of that daily conversation with your staff.
So we're running close on time. We've got time for a few questions that came in. So I'm going to run through these quickly. Jenny, I think this one's probably for you. They said, is there a concern that screening a new employee for the WOTC, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, during onboarding would discourage them?
The funny thing is, in our system, the employer doesn't even know what category they are in. So the employee does the questionnaire, and the employer gets a notification. You can now get this much credit if the employee keeps on working for you, right? So employer does not even know what they said, if they were on food stamps or if they were incarcerated. That is actually not told to the employer. We don't know. So that's something that you want to mention. That, hey, we are screening you therefore because we can get a federal tax credit for you from the government, and we will not know these answers. We don't know them. So hopefully that's something you can discuss with your employees. And again, what Justin just said, ongoing discussion about these things, right? Not keeping them in some kind of shelf and let's not talk about the WOTC. No, let's mention it. Let's keep it an open discussion, open door policy when it comes to this. But again, the employer won't even know what the category is that enable them to get the credit.
Got it. One other question, does the handbook go to full-time and part-time employees?
Yeah. Handbook should go to everybody.
Absolutely. I have written a lot of policies for like PTO or vacation, like everybody gets sick, but then vacation is only for full-time employees. So that's something that, again, what Justin again perfectly said, you want to keep it clear. I've seen these employee handbooks that I don't even understand what the policy is. So when I take on a payroll, and vacation and sick and PTOs, always we track that on payroll here at Heartland. I always look at those policies and say, to the owner, do you understand this? Somebody written it 2 years or 5 years ago, and nobody understands that. So it has to be clear. And in that policy, you can say, we offer sick leave for everybody. We offer vacation only for full-time employees. So absolutely, you can make it those distinctions between things. But social media policy will be for everybody, obviously.
And sexual harassment and
Sexual
arbitration,
harassment and
and
arbitration.
EEO, and a whole bunch of other things.
Yes, yes.
So one last question, is a company ever too small for a whole handbook? So no.
No, you know, I really don't think so. I really don't think so. And with payroll services like us, we charge quite little for it. You know, you can get the payroll service for this and you add the HR module that we can build the handbook with you. It's not that much more money. It can come to about $800 to $1,200 more a year. So it's not a lot, and unlimited questions and unlimited forms and everything else. I do always recommend having someone like Beth look it after and spend the money on using Beth's beautiful brain over there to look over something like that and do it, obviously. That's one time, once a year. You know, it's very important. Again, it really depends. Do you want to then 2 years ago have a lawsuit because something was written wrong or not explained at all, right? So spend a little money up front on these employee documents and handbooks and so forth to really protect yourself. Compliant and protection is really behind all the HR and labor law in California that we are trying to do, Beth and I, for sure, here in California for our clients.
Awesome. Well, we are right up on time. So here is contact information for everyone. Justin with Kickfin, if anybody wants a demo to learn about cashless tip payouts for their restaurant team, you can go here. You can email Justin directly. Jenny is always available to tell you more about Heartland and how you can digitize and automate that onboarding process. And then obviously Beth, with any legal questions, she will be happy to answer them for you. I will send all of these links out via email along with the recording, hopefully this afternoon. If not this afternoon, then tomorrow morning, look for it in your inbox. So thank you everyone for joining, and thanks to our panelists. This was a great discussion. We really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keely. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.